I remember the first time I heard the sirens wailing behind me long before a single body was found. It was the night of December 20th, 1968, and the wind off Lake Berryessa carried a chill that seeped into my bones. I sat in my unassuming Dodge, the engine purring softly, eyes fixed on the couple laughing inside their tent. They thought the darkness would shield them. They thought no one could see beyond the campfire's glow, but I saw everything. I saw the way she tossed her hair as he leaned in to kiss her. I saw her hands slip beneath the blanket. I saw the curve of her neck. I saw his arm muscle tense, and I decided, in that moment, that this night would belong to me. By 11:15 p.m., I had donned my makeshift costume, an ordinary jumper, dark trousers, a fabric harness holding my cleaver at my hip. The mask I fashioned from an old raincoat hid my face, but it did more. It transformed me. In its folds, I became the author of fear. I approached the tent, my boots pressing softly into the grass. Heartbeats thudded in my ears. I wanted them to listen to their own panic as much as I enjoyed my own adrenaline. A single slip of the knife, precise and deliberate, and the silence returned. I left behind no fingerprints, no footprints, only a message. I scrawled a short cipher in the dirt, a jumble of circles and lines, the first of many that would taunt the authorities. Beneath it, I drew my symbol, a circle crossed by a plus sign. Weeks later, newspapers printed my code, speculating on its meaning. I grinned when detectives called it nonsense. I relished the idea of educated men staring at my cipher, scratching their heads. I was no mere murderer. I was an artist, crafting a masterpiece of terror. Tonight, as I pen this letter, by lamplight, I hear the distant click of typewriters, the frantic voice of reporters. My words will spread across California, igniting curiosity and dread. They will beg to know who I am. They will demand that I be stopped. But they won't. This is only the beginning. Soon, I will send them more ciphers, harder, more complex. I will collect their fear like trophies, each frightened whisper another testament to my power. And they will never catch me, for I am already enshrined in mystery, the Zodiac. They found the bodies at First Light Prel, 10th, 1969, in Vallejo. Police cruisers swarmed the scene before I'd even returned home. 2 teenagers, bound and shot at close range, their faces frozen in terror. The newspapers screamed Vallejo victims, but I knew better. The city was merely a stage. I watched the televised reports, hidden behind drawn curtains. Reporters speculated about rage, about mindless violence. They showed the crude circle and cross symbol I'd carved into the ground at Berryessa. They labeled it Zodiac, as if I needed a name. I sipped my coffee, savoring the sweetness of their confusion. Detective Dave Toschi strutted across the screen, fedora cocked revolver at his hip. He vowed to crack this case wide open, a promise that amused me. Little did he know, he was dancing to my tune. I set aside my morning paper and sharpened my knife. My next message would be more than a cipher. I would force them to play my game on my terms. 2 nights later, I visited Lake Herman Road. The couple parked under dim lights never saw me approach. I struck without hesitation, no mess, no noise. When it was done, I laid out a crimson letter on the hood of their car, my handwriting neat. Dear editor, I am the murderer of the Vallejo teenagers last week. I folded the note and slipped away before the first patrol rolled by. Hours later, newspapers received 3 copies of my letter, each addressed to a different major daily. Inside envelopes, I included the first cipher, my masterpiece of scrambled symbols, at dawn. Headlines blared: Zodiac takes responsibility, cipher clues, baffle FBI. I leaned back in my chair, feeling that familiar rush. Across a single, night-eyed transformed anonymous violence into legend. They convened task forces, flew experts from Quantico, and even consulted academic cryptographers, all to decipher my message. They boasted progress. One symbol looks like a V, they said, but none pieced together the whole. Meanwhile, I studied their failures. With each decoded fragment they published, I learned their methods. Soon, I would contrive ciphers so fiendish they'd break their own spirit trying to solve them. I smiled, fingering the cool steel of my blade. They were wide awake now, their anxiety feeding my creativity. I would let them stew in their fear, waiting for the next demand, the next promise of horror. And when the morning papers grew cold, I would remind them that the Zodiac was always hungry for more. They think they're closing in on me. I can feel the pressure radiating off the newspapers, smell it in the stale coffee of the precinct houses. Detective Toski's milk carton mug sits on his desk like a badge of honor, even though he still hasn't figured out that every clue I leave behind is a breadcrumb designed to lure him deeper into my labyrinth. Late one night, I slipped into the Vallejo Police Department's public records room, unmasked and silent. Through their unlocked filing drawers, I watched Toski's painstaking notes, victim timelines, witness sketches, even diagrams of the symbols they believed my cipher resembled. They thought that by organizing chaos, they could predict my next move. How quaint. Before I left, I rifled through the stack of unsent letters on Detective Williams's desk. He'd drafted a Dear Zodiac appeal, begging me to stop this senseless bloodshed, promising harsher rewards for informants. I took that draft, folded it carefully, and returned it to its folder only after I'd sprinkled a few drops of my own green-tinted ink across the paper, leaving a faint, dripping signature. I wanted them to know I'd been there. Back at my apartment, I studied the forensic photos printed on glossy modstock. Each time they photographed the crime scene, they lost something. The smell of fresh-cut grass, the sting of the night air on my lungs, the echo of my own heartbeat. They turned living terror into sterile snapshots. I turned snapshots into trophies pinned on my walls like butterflies. Now I prepare my next act. Tomorrow's headline will read, Zodiac challenges America to solve his new cipher. But theirs will be the loser's headline. Authorities admit defeat. I have already crafted the symbols, embedding them within a seemingly innocuous newspaper clipping. Puzzle so twisted that even the most brilliant code breakers will snap. Under the strain, I watch the sunrise through my grimy window, thinking of the families who await answers at their dinner tables. I think of the terrified gasp when they see my symbol, an invitation, an ultimatum. Others call me monster, but I prefer creator. For in this theater of fear, I am both playwright and performer, director and audience. When that first scream rings out in response to my next letter, I will sit back, savoring the symphony of panic that my pen has conducted. In California's restless nights, my name will echo long after the final note has faded, and even then, they will never know the face behind the message. By the time I sent my third letter, they were desperate. Their news desks buzzed with frantic callers. Editorial boards argued over the morality of printing my demands. Meanwhile, I sat at my kitchen table, inhaling the Thames of strong coffee. As I carefully unfolded the crisp stationery, The envelope's seal bore my symbol circle and cross, pressed into the wax like a dark prophecy. Inside lay my message, penned in precise looping script. Dear editor, when I find my slaves for the afterlife, I will not settle for mere names on a page. I will take them one by one, like treasures, until the home of the brave becomes the house of the dead. Solve the cipher below, and I may grant you mercy. Fail, and the blood will flow unchecked. Beneath the chilling words, I had drawn a grid of symbols, no longer the simple jumble of circles and slashes, but a fractal nightmare of interlocking shapes. Each symbol referred to victims by birth date, location, and even astrological sign. My tribute to the stars that watched over my dark crusade as the morning light crept through my window. I knew the papers would splatter every line across their front pages. I anticipated the headlines: Zodiac's bloodthirsty code, cult of death, killer's twisted theology. They would treat my words as madness, but underneath lay a precision only I could appreciate in the suburban homes of California. Families gathered around breakfast tables, reading about slaves for the afterlife. Mothers clutched their children, fathers read with clenched jaws. I smiled, picturing the ripple of unease spreading from household to household. A silent wave of dread powered by my letter dot. At the police station, Detective Toschi pounded the table. He ripped the photocopy from the typewriter and thrust it under Williams's nose. We need experts on cults, symbolism, astrology, whatever this is, he barked. Williams nodded, already dialing contacts at the university. They didn't know that the key to my cipher lay hidden in plain sight. The Zodiac's own star chart, overlaid with murder sites I'd plotted long before I took pen to paper. Even if they called in every codebreaker in the nation, they'd only see pieces of the puzzle. The whole would slip through their fingers like sand. Late that night, I stood beneath the pale moon outside my apartment. The distant hum of traffic was a lullaby compared to the roar in my head, the echo of every gunshot, every whispered plea, every gasp for air. I turned my face to the sky, tracing the constellations I'd immortalized in ink. They think they'll break me. They think they'll stop the killings. But the Zodiac is eternal. Each cipher, each letter, is a thread woven into the tapestry of terror I've created. And as long as the stars remain fixed above, my hunt will continue unseen, unstoppable. They announced a breakthrough at dawn. I watched the bulletin on Channel 2, feigning surprise when the anchor credited a mystery cryptographer for deciphering my latest message. They displayed fragments of my grid lines of text, they claimed, translated to taunts and threats. You are being hunted. The anchor read, and the key lies buried in the stars. I tapped my fingers against the oak tabletop, amused. They had indeed uncovered those words, but only because I'd intentionally left them exposed in a newspaper clipping sent to the Chronicle. The real cipher, the one that mapped future attack sites and timelines, remained hidden within the fractal patterns. Detective Williams strutted into the press room, chest puffed out. He held up laminated sheets as though they were relics from the Holy Grail. We're closer than ever, he declared, voice ringing with triumph. Reporters nodded, eagerly peppering him with questions about suspect profiles and upcoming police stings. Meanwhile, I sat at my typewriter, composing my next letter. My fingertips danced over the keys, each keystroke a calculated promise of carnage. When I finished, I tore the page free and folded it along precise creases. In the margins, I sketched a miniature version of my Simbalan oath scrawled in black ink. That night, I drove the winding roads of Napa County, headlights cutting through the fog. The victim I'd chosen was a lone cyclist, miles from any help. He pedaled with confidence, unaware that the Nancy Drew bicycle light clipped to his. Handlebars would not save him. I approached silently, the roar of my engine masking my footsteps. With one swift motion, I ended his ride. His body slumped to the gravel, the wheel clattering to a stop. Beside him, I placed an envelope addressed to the Chronicle, my next letter. When the papers printed my message the next morning, they included Williams's deciphered text jet, omitting the footnote I'd embedded, the real instruction, a coded map to a future crime scene in Sonoma. Detectives pored over the published version, oblivious that their triumph was of my design. In the solitude of my apartment, I lit a cigarette and watched the smoke curl upward. Each breath filled me with satisfaction. They would chase ghost leads until their nerves frayed. They would stake out empty fields, wire up dead ends, and never anticipate the true strike zone. Across California, terrified whispers spread. Parents forbade late-night rides. Couples avoided scenic lofts. I observed the fear I'd sown from the shadows, raising my glass to the irony of it all. Law enforcement, confident of their success, while I counted down the days to the next performance. The Zodiac was not defeated. He was merely biding his time, allowing the hunters to draw themselves into glaring spotlights before extinguishing them. And when the final act came, the world would know that no cipher, no matter how solved, could chain the mind that conceived it. The night air on Spring Street was thick with fog as I slipped from my car, my boots silent on the damp pavement. I felt the thrill of anticipation coil in my chest. Tonight's prey was an off-duty patrolman, fresh from shift and oblivious to my presence. He walked purposefully, eyes darting at every shadow, too alert to be an easy target, which made him all the more delicious. I waited in the alley beside a shuttered storefront, the staccato beat of his footsteps growing louder. As he passed, I emerged, mask drawn tight. His radio crackled at his hip, the faint voice of his partner, a soundtrack of helplessness. He reached for his holster to slow dot. My blade flashed under the street lamp. His eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in defiance. A single strike, precise and silent, ended the chase. I watched as his life pooled on the cobblestones, his blood a dark mirror to the city's glistening sheen beneath the patrolman's body. I placed my calling card, a neatly folded letter sealed with wax and my symbols stamped in dark purple. I pressed the envelope into the damp ground, the imprint leaving a subtle stain, an unspoken promise that no place was safe, not even behind the thin veneer of law and order. Back home, I pored over the morning editions. Headlines blared. Zodiac strikes at police. Fear grips California patrols. Is anyone safe? Detectives scrambled to reassure the public, but their words rang hollow. Every man in uniform glanced nervously over his shoulder, and I relished their unease. In my study, I spread out maps of the Greater Bay Area, connecting crime scenes with taut red string. Each line pulsed with possibility. Locations whispered their secrets to me. I traced them with a fingertip, imagining the next tableau of horror I would design. My latest letter arrived on my desk before dawn. It murmured of a ritual, the selection of my next victims by celestial alignment, demanding that the newspapers publish my star chart for all to see. If they refused, I promised a sacrifice at midnight's peak. They printed it. I saw the chart sprawled across broadsheets as I sipped my coffee. Scores of readers glanced at the strange constellation map, intrigued by its unfamiliar symbols. Little did they know, it was more than astronomy, was a timeline, a diary of impending doom. Detective Toschi studied the chart in his office, brow furrowed. He sought patterns, but stars shift with time, elusive as my identity. His team computed angles and dates, trying to predict the next peak. They marked calendars, prepared stakeouts, yet they hunted ghosts. Tonight, under the cold watch of the cosmos, I will choose my next victims. Their homes stand tranquil, unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon. And when the clock strikes midnight, I will be there, conducting the crescendo of panic that follows. They may think they dictate the terms of this chase, but in truth, they are pawns dancing to my tune. And I, the Zodiac, will remain the unseen orchestrator, ever hidden in plain sight. They dubbed it the breaking point, the moment when law enforcement's confidence shatters and doubt seeps in like a slow poison. I watched it unfold on television, the flicker of the screen illuminating my face in the dark. Detective Toschi stood before a wall of case files, his hands pressed against the laminate as though it could hold him upright. Williams droned through talking points, insisting they were closer than ever. Their words tumbled into the air, hollow echoes against the tide of evidence I had carefully manipulated. That night, I slipped out under the guise of a midnight jog, the humid air clinging to my skin. My destination was a forgotten warehouse. On the outskirts of Oaklander Place, I had scoped weeks earlier. Its broken windows and rusted doors made it perfect for a staged encounter. Inside, I arranged mannequins dressed in police uniforms, rigged with motion-triggered speakers, playing garbled radio chatter. When the investigators arrived, they would believe they'd cornered me in the warehouse raid they'd been planning. I hid nearby, my breath steady. Through the haze of street lamps, I saw the convoy roll in unmarked sedans, squad cars, even to HRT vans with blacked-out windows. Officers fanned out, weapons drawn, flashlights slicing through dust and darkness. I pressed myself against a cracked wall, heart hammering. Savoring the tension, a young detective kicked open the door and triggered the mannequin's speakers. He ducked instinctively, shouting into his radio. Guns fired, echoes ricocheted, and it looked for a moment as if they'd found me. Yet no one saw the real figure slipping out a side exit, my silhouette swallowed by the night by dawn. Headlines blared, warehouse sting fails, Zodiac eludes armed task force. The press reveled in the spectacle, broadcasting the images of shattered glass and spent shell casings. I pored over the news clippings, noting the faces of those most embarrassed by the failure. I wanted them to feel the sting of futility, to taste the bitterness of defeat. Back in my apartment, I studied the police reports. They logged survivor statements, forensic dust patterns, the location of every spent round. All these details, once public, became building blocks for my next cipher, an intricate design that would weave their own failures into a tapestry of mockery. In the quiet that followed, I penned a new letter. Dear Chief Inspector, you assembled armies, deployed every resource, and still you came up empty. Your mistake was believing I would follow your script. Now, watch as I write the final act when you cannot interrupt. The curtain will fall at sunrise. I sealed it with my symbol and placed it atop the morning paper at my doorstep. Inside, I hid a clue mirror shard fit into the envelope flap so that whoever opened it saw their own reflection. A subtle reminder, you chase shadows until you become one. They will come for me again, guns drawn and egos bruised, but I will always remain one step ahead, dancing through the fractures of their broken mirrors. And when the dawn breaks, they will see once more that the Zodiac cannot be captured, only glimpsed in the shattered reflections he leaves behind. They say power corrupts, but in my case, power revealed clarity. Each letter I wrote was a confession and a command both to myself and to the world. But lately, a new sensation rippled through me, doubt. Not about my superiority, but about the silence that follows each scream. For weeks, I've watched as police analysts pored over transcripts of my letters, dissected eyewitness accounts, and speculated on my mental state. They labeled me obsessive, deranged, messianic. Their chatter was a cacophony in my mind, some voices resonating, others grating like nails on chalkboards. I retreated to my sanctuary, the locked room at the back of my apartment, where every crime scene photograph was pinned like trophies, where each cipher draft hung side by side, evolving like a twisted genealogy. The walls were a collage of fear bloodstains, sketches, clipped news articles. It was there, in the flickering glow of a single bulb, that I confronted my reflection in a grimy mirror. My eyes stared back, hollow yet burning with intent. I traced the lines of my mask in the glass, imagining how easily I could tear it away and reveal what a monster, a myth, or simply a man. The question gnawed at me today. I drafted the boldest letter yet. No ciphers, only plain prose, raw and unapologetic. You want to know why I do this? Because chaos is the truest measure of control. When you scramble the natural order, when mothers weep at dinner tables and fathers lock their doors at dusk, you prove that even the strongest foundations can crumble. And in that collapse, I stand tallest. Beneath the letter, I sketched a crude timeline outlining my past murder dates, locations, astrological symbols, all converging on a final ominous mark. October 11th, 1969. I folded the sheet, sealed it, and addressed it to the Chronicle, letting the weight of its threats sink in. Tonight, I will deliver it in person. Not for applause, not for headlines, but to feel the tremor my footsteps evoke in the building's marrow. I will slip into that newsroom like a phantom and slide the letter onto the editor's desk. Then I will vanish, leaving only my echo dot. As the hour approaches, I feel the old exhilaration return, sharp and intoxicating. Fear is a currency I mint with every act, and soon this plain letter will bankrupt them. They will see my face, my words, my truth, and know there is no redemption for their arrogance. In these final moments before I step into their midst, I clutch my blade tighter. The knife's edge is my compass, guiding me through the moral fog I've created. I am both author and destroyer, playwright and executioner. And as long as I breathe, the Zodiac will write his verses in blood. I arrived at the Chronicle just before midnight, the city's hum fading behind me as I slipped through the alley entrance. My heart beat steadily beneath the fabric of my jumper, each thump a drum signaling impending chaos. I carried only one object, the plain white envelope sealed with wax and my symbol dot inside. I'd written the year's most brazen confession, not a cipher, but a naked boast of control. I craved the tremor in their spines when they saw their own fear scrawled on their editor's desk. The lobby was deserted, save for the dim glow of the security monitor and the soft click of the last elevator doors closing. I paused at the security desk, where a lone guard slumped over a crossword puzzle. His keys jingled at his belt, a lullaby of complacency. With one swift motion, I clipped his radio. My hand pressed a finger to his neck to stifle any sound. I leaned in close, whispering the truth he'd never speak. "You know my name now." Then I let him slide to the floor, silenced, reclaiming the space. Upstairs, fluorescent lights buzzed along empty corridors. I navigated by memory, avoiding offices with illuminated signs. At the end of the hallway, the editor's door stood ajar, a pale sliver of light leaking out. My reflection flickered in the glass-pane Zodiac's mask, featureless and immaculate. Inside, the editor dozed over a stack of proofs. His desk lamp cast long shadows across pages peppered with my previous letters. With a swift motion, I slid the new envelope into the crevice beside his typewriter. The click of the closing flap was a single gunshot in the hush. I turned to leave, but paused at the window's ledge. From this height, the city looked serene and aware of the storm I'd unleashed. I wondered how long it would take before someone discovered my midnight visitation, before pandemonium erupted in these hallowed halls. Back in the alley, I exhaled, the tension dissolving like mist under morning sun. My deed was done not through violence, but through the fear of the unknown. The next day, newspapers across California printed my plain letter in full. Readers recoiled at paragraphs detailing the extent of my slaves for the afterlife, each word a hammer blow to complacency. Editors scrambled to remove names for privacy, but it was too late. The confession was public, the threat absolute. Detective Toschi read the publication in disbelief. He raked a hand through his hair, brow furrowed. He was inside, he muttered. He walked past our guard and never broke a sweat. His team convened a new task force focused on newspaper security, but the damage was done. The Chronicle was tarnished, and I'd proven that no fortress could hold me. That night, I raised a glass to my reflection in the mirror. The mask stared back, enigmatic as the cosmos. I had become a shadow in the light, a phantom in the foldand. The world would never know whether to hunt my body or my legend. The city was deafening after my newsroom visit, sirens wailing, helicopters chopping overhead, every newsroom and police station locked down like a fortress. I watched from a distance as detectives swarmed the Chronicle building, their flashlights, stitching lines across brick and glass, yet none pursued me beyond their barricades. In the days that followed, the public clung to fragments of my confession like tribal talismans, whispering of slaves for the afterlife in hushed tones. The phrase spread faster than any cipher ever could. Mothers chanted it like a warning. Teenagers dared each other to recite it in empty school halls. I reveled in the lore I'd created, my mythology outpacing even the most elaborate codes. But behind my satisfaction lay a creeping restlessness. The silence between my letters had grown too loud. Detectives claimed they'd learned my patterns, journalists speculated on my madness, and the public demanded more. I sensed a hunger, awakening, collective desire for the next chapter. One night, I returned to my sanctuary, the locked room where my trophies hung like grim trophies. I surveyed the photographs, the maps, the crumpled drafts. Each one's artifact now felt cold, like relics of a past life. I needed something new, an act that would redefine the Zodiac's legacy. I sketched a bold proposal on yellow legal paper. Dear America, you think you know my methods. You believe in your ciphers, your symbols, your star charts. But true terror lies in the unexpected. I will write my final letter not in ink, but in blood. On October 11th, at 10 p.m., the city of San Francisco will bear witness to the last cipher ever etched upon the very ground you walk. Decode it, if you dare. Fail, and the earth itself will scream. I sealed the draft with trembling excitement. This was no ordinary letter, it was a declaration of apocalypse. I would carve my cipher into concrete, a sprawling mosaic, visible. From every rooftop, a message so vast it would engulf the skyline. In the days before the deadline, I prepared meticulously. I acquired tools, chisels, stencils. Floodlight Sand scouted a location, the plaza outside City Hall, a place of civic pride and pedestrian traffic. Under its arches, I would etch my final testament. When the night arrived, I moved like a wraith. Through darkened streets, dragging equipment behind me. I bypassed security cameras, neutralized floodlights with spray paint, and set up my stencils beneath the marble steps. As the clock ticked toward 10 p.m., I began to carve its strike. Of the hammer deliberate, each line a countdown to chaos. Passers-by kept their distance, sensing the gravity in the air but too startled to intervene. The echo of each chisel blow resonated like a heartbeat. By 10:05 p.m., the cipher sprawled across the plaza, a constellation of grooves and angles glowing. Under my portable floodlights, the symbol at its heart, a circle and cross twice overlaid, seemed to pulse with menace. I stepped back, breathing heavily, and watched the plaza become my canvas of dread. Then I vanished into the fog. Behind me, the first startled screams arose as pedestrians stumbled into the maze of etched lines, unsure where to step, how to read the vast enigma beneath their feet. Police radios crackled in the distance, reporters scribbled frantic notes, and the city held its collective breath. In that moment, I realized I had transcended letters on paper. I had become an omnipresent force, inscribed upon the land itself. The Zodiac's final cipher would never be forgotten, etched in blood and stone, echoing in every corner of the city long after my footsteps faded. The morning sun rose over a city immobilized by my final cipher. Headlines screamed Zodiac's monument of madness. City Hall Plaza becomes puzzle of terror. San Francisco in standoff with killer. I watched from the safety of my apartment as the plaza filled with onlookers, bloodless, curious tourists. Hushed office workers and grim-faced law enforcement scrambling to interpret the grooves beneath their feet. Detective Toschi knelt beside the etched lines, a tape, measure in hand. He traced the angles methodically, comparing them to star charts, street grids, even subway schedules. His brow furrowed deeper with each glance. Reporters jostled for sound bites. Is this the Zodiac's final message? Will the city recover? Their voices blended into static noise that only fueled my pride. Meanwhile, the public reaction spiraled into hysteria. Some tried to solve the cipher as a challenge. Others deemed it a curse, refusing to step foot near City Hall. Conspiracy theories flourished. Secret cults, government cover-ups, alien intervention. I smiled, knowing I'd orchestrated not just a crime, but a legend. By midday, task forces declared the plaza a crime scene. They planted barriers, metal detectors, and forensic teams poured chemicals into the grooves, hoping to reveal hidden inks or biological traces. Their efforts were thorough but futile. My message lay in the pattern itself, invisible to any chemical test. In my apartment, I drafted my farewell letter to those who survived this day. Know that you participated in my masterpiece. Look, not at the stone, but at your fear reflected in its lines. The Zodiac's final act is completed in the earth and etched in your minds. I vanish now into the myth I created. I signed it with a flourish, dated it October 12th, 1969, and mailed it to every major newspaper. ensuring that my words reached even those who dared not visit the plaza that evening. I watched as the police used cranes and cameras to photograph the cipher from above, projecting it onto screens in makeshift command centers. Analysts zoomed in on every intersection, every curve, every gap. They worked frantically, yet their best decoding attempts yielded nothing but poetic threats and fragmented coordinates, leading nowhere as night fell. San Francisco lay quiet under the weight of its own terror. The cipher remained unsolved, a looming monument to my ingenuity. I poured myself a drink and raised it to the empty air. I had given them closure and confusion to competing forces that would haunt them long after my disappearance. I extinguished my lamp and retreated to darkness, content in the knowledge that my legacy would endure. The Zodiac had slipped away, leaving behind only echoes of fear, of fascination, and of the unanswered question: who was he? Years would pass, and the world would change, but the Zodiac remained immortal in newspapers, books, and whispered conversations. True crime aficionados retraced my steps. Film crews recreated my murders. Cryptographers still debated the meaning of my final cipher. In every retelling, I was reborn a phantom archetype of terror. I watched it all unfold through clippings pasted into scrapbooks. I saw theories ranging from a lone madman to government conspiracies to extraterrestrial masterminds. Every hypothesis was a mirror of public fear, and each reflection fed the myth I had crafted. Occasionally, an amateur codebreaker claimed a breakthrough, a partial translation here, a new symbol interpretation there. I allowed these fleeting victories, knowing none could unravel the full tapestry I wove. My original ciphers lay hidden in private collections, buried in archives, or simply lost to time. On the anniversary of my final act, candlelight vigils were held at City Hall Plaza. Flowers, notes, and recreations of my symbol adorned the marble pavement. Some mourned victims. Others celebrated the audacity of a killer who turned fear into art. I would have been pleased by the devotion. Nothing pleases a creator more than an audience that refuses to let go. In the cultural zeitgeist, Zodiac became shorthand for the unknowable monster next door. I inspired novels, podcasts, even theme park attractions. The world consumed and commodified me, packaging terror into entertainment. Yet beneath it all lay the unsettling truth. No one could say for certain who I was, where I'd gone, or if I was still out there, watching and waiting. My narrative slipped through decades, a ghost story for the modern age. Children grew up hearing about the Zodiac. Detectives studied his methods in training academies. Psychologists analyzed the twisted motives behind slaves for the afterlife. Each generation encountered the myth anew, their fears reshaped by contemporary events, but rooted in my original message: chaos reigns. And so, I remain hidden, elusive, eternal. My letters collect dust in vaults. My cipher puzzles gather digital code. My legend thrives wherever the human mind confronts its own darkness. For every question unanswered, my power grows. The Zodiac is more than a killer. He is an idea, a shadow in the collective psyche. Tonight, I sit in anonymity, perhaps just another face in the crowd. Yet somewhere, a detective pores over old files, convinced they will find me. And somewhere, a frightened whisper travels between strangers. He's still out there. The truth is, I will never die. As long as curiosity endures, as long as fear finds fertile ground, the Zodiac Cipher will echo through time, an eternal riddle without a solution, a testament to the mind that dared to challenge an entire nation.